Hello, I'm John Eldridge, and welcome to the Ransomed Heart audio podcast. For more information on Ransomed Heart Ministries, our resources and events, please visit us online at www.ransomedheart.com. Hello, I'm John Eldridge, and welcome to the Ransomed Heart podcast, which is something that feels almost like our weekly radio show. And as we were talking and praying about what God would have us share with you today and over the next couple of weeks, we began by just praying and listening and saying, Lord, what's on your heart? And several things came up. One was listening to God and just how vital that is, that we understand it's available to us as followers of Christ, learning to hear the voice of God, learning to practice that, to put it into practice in all of the very sort of practical, small ways that we end up living our lives. Each day is filled with 100 decisions that we make. Certainly each week is. And it's those decisions, it's almost more the collective momentum of the small decisions that really end up making a life. And I think what we tend to do is focus on the big ones. Do we sell the house? Do we move? Is this the right person to marry? Lord, what do you want me to do for a job or for my calling? That kind of thing. Lord, where would you have us go to church? I think we tend to take some of the bigger decisions. Where should the kids go to school? Mm-hmm. What should I major in college? And it's important to bring those things to God. But I think what we miss is that the actual momentum of a life, the cumulative momentum of a life is really made up of the hundreds of small decisions that we're making all the time. How we spend our time, who we spend our time with, all of that. And especially now, I can only imagine as we, continue to kind of ride the roller coaster of the economic impact of what's been going on, at least in the United States, but certainly around the world now. Wow, what do we do with that? Those implications are bearing down on us. I know that we're feeling them as a family. Decisions about, gosh, do we take that trip we were thinking about taking this summer? Or, do we buy that chair that we were thinking about buying was the question on the table this weekend. All of these decisions feel pressing. They feel important, and they have an accumulated weight to them.
Yeah, and John, stress from the outside world often exposes kind of our holiness or lack thereof. And what I find in stressful environs is my need to listen to God and either my lack of learning or understanding how that works. And, it's kind of like economic times. Everyone wants to budget and start saving when things get tough. Well, things are getting tough, and I think a lot of us go, wow, Lord, I need to hear you now more than ever. How do I do this? The scramble for holiness, intimacy.
Right.
The New Year's resolutions. We're going to be closer to God.
Oh,
We're really going to work on our relationship.
Mm-hmm. Going to get our budget together.
Yeah, all of that.
Yeah. Going to eat right, going to exercise. Well,
why did you bring up those two?
The example of, okay, now I'm going to budget.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to live financially responsibly is a great analogy to, okay, now I'm going to listen to God. Right. Now I'm going to walk with God. Because you know how it goes, right? If you haven't practiced those things, to suddenly try and find, fourth gear and just drop it in and say, okay, today I'm going to be financially responsible. It is, as we have often expressed here, crawl, walk, run.
Yeah.
You don't get to run until you've learned to walk, and you don't get to walk until you have taken your first movements toward crawling.
Yeah.
So let's start here in listening with God. Trying to hear the voice of God under stress or duress, under crisis, or when I come to God with even just some deep sense of urgency, usually doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
After years of practicing hearing the voice of God, I can just almost guarantee you that that's not going to be helpful. And that can be very discouraging. People come to the wrong conclusions, They come to God and say, oh my, Lord, what do I do? I just lost my job. What, and there is so much drama.
Yes.
Internally and externally. They don't hear anything from God.
Yeah.
And they come to the conclusion, well, God doesn't speak, or he doesn't speak to me. I don't hear from God.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say, no, that's pretty much true for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Don't come to any larger conclusion than this.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to hear from God when there's a lot of drama.
Oh, I'm hearing, 20 voices, everything from shame, contempt, the voice of the enemy, to my own stuff. I need to sell this. I need to do this. And then voices of Lori, others, friends, counsel, a zillion voices. And in the confusion, you're just looking for a sign from God. How many times have I said, driving down the boulevard, 3 green lights means I'll do this.
Yeah.
I'm just grasping for
Right.
some sign that God's, because I don't know what his voice sounds like, or I'm not familiar with conversation.
Yep. Or throw open the Bible.
Yes.
Right. First page, first verse, your eyes fall on, Lord, speak.
Yeah. I remember Earl. He did that. He got directions, something.
Right. So, folks, can we just remind you that all of that panic, stress, grasping, all of that scrambling usually doesn't result in hearing from God. We may grasp upon something that we think was God, and then when it doesn't turn out, it only adds, more to our unbelief or to our conviction that we don't hear from God. So level one, you have to surrender all of that to God. And that's why coming to practice listening to God is such a healthy thing to do, because the first thing you have to do is let go of the drama. Just, Lord, forgive me for scrambling. It's just like budgeting. It's like, Lord, forgive me for my financial foolishness in the past, and I know I'm not going to change this today. So mercy, I surrender this to you, and I let go of my insistence that you speak to me here, now, and in this moment. And that you have to bring yourself back to that posture. I yield. I yield, Lord. And I find that it's only as I begin to do that, and I can feel things shifting in my own soul, I can feel the fear. Okay. All right, there's all the financial fear. Lord, I give that to you again. It's back. And you may need to give that to him, 30 times a day,
yes.
Right? Okay, Lord, it's back. I surrender that to you again. I know that it's going to be difficult for me to hear when I'm in panic mode. So, Lord, I love you. I trust you. I believe you. I yield this to you. And then another thing that's really proved helpful to us in learning and in practicing hearing the voice of God is to ask small questions, ask simple questions, because it helps to cut down the drama, and it helps to focus you. It helps to focus your own heart and soul, your own spirit as you're listening to God. Sometimes I just have to start with very simple things. I'll even ask Jesus something as simple as, do you love me? Because I know the answer to that, right? Scripture makes it very clear. I am loved. I am deeply loved by God, and nothing can change that. And it's almost a way of sort of finding the station on my dial, kind of like, Lord, because if I don't hear yes, I do love you. If I hear no, I don't then I know that other things are operating. It's almost as simple as, Lord, do you love me? Yes, I do. Okay, I'm hearing, I'm tuning in. I love you too, Lord. I worship you. I give myself over to you. The simple acts of consecration, and then asking very simple questions. It may not be good or helpful to start with, Lord, how do we solve our financial crisis? It's too big of a question. It has too many components to it. There's way too much emotion involved.
Yeah.
And I think I need to start with simpler things. And literally, this weekend it was, do you want us to buy a chair? There's a chair that we'd like to get for the house. But, to be honest, it's no longer, looking like, we can just run out and do those things, right?
Yes.
And so it's stop, ask something simple. Lord, today, this week, what are the simple steps I can take that'll begin to help me make better decisions in this area?
Yeah. John, as you're talking, two things just pop up into my mind and one is, since we're talking about these kind of panic, stressed times, or this kind of renewed energy to change our walk with God or our finances or whatever. If there is a lot of stress, drama, you probably need to pull away, kind of break away to do some of this.
Good.
And then the second thing is to say, we're panicked, we're returning, we're kind of wanting God. And what's his heart posture? He welcomes us. Good to have you back. I love your heart. I mean, his heart is so much for what we want.
Yeah.
It's just, how do we develop that? His heart is, I love you.
Mm-hmm. And he wants to speak.
Yes.
It's so important for us to at least be told that again.
Yeah.
Friends, he wants to speak. He does speak. John 10, Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice. 4 times he says it in John 10 alone. My sheep hear my voice. And so it is his desire to speak. It is your privilege as a child of God to hear his voice. It's normal for his followers to hear his voice. The scriptures are absolutely filled with stories. And not just the scriptures, but down through human history as well, through the history of the church. I mean, just hundreds of millions of stories of God in conversational intimacy with his people.
Yeah. So when we ask that simple question, does God love me? I mean, we want to make sure our listeners know, yes, even in these moments of kind of panicked or renewing our commitment once again, his heart and arms are there for us, and he really wants to speak.
Really, it's absolutely changed our lives, learning to listen to the voice of God. Both for Stacy and I personally, teaching our sons, it is how we lead and run Ransomed Heart, that we seek and cultivate a conversational intimacy with God, recognizing that, sometimes you don't always hear, or you don't always hear right away.
Yeah.
And in those moments, I just let it go, and I go, you know what, maybe not in this moment, but today, tomorrow, this week, I know God will get through to me. There's all kinds of ways that God can get through to me. Obviously, through his word is the primary way, but through the counsel of good friends, conversation with people, and then just all his creative ways. A song that I plug in on the stereo and suddenly track 3, and it's, oh my goodness, that's exactly what I was praying about earlier this week. Billboards, for heaven's sakes. Just so many different ways he can speak to us. But what we wanted to do in setting out, desperate need for God, we need to cultivate and practice conversational intimacy with God. We need to bring these questions to him, all of our questions, and we need to stay with the conversation until we do know that we've heard. not to let discouragement get in and go, well, it's been 30 seconds. I haven't heard from God. He's obviously not going to speak to me about that.
Time is short. I need to make a decision.
Be gracious. Be gracious with yourself. Be gracious with the process, right? He'll speak. He'll speak, but so much of the process is simply the drawing of our hearts back in His direction, recognizing how much panic is operating inside, the confusion, the anger, all of the feelings. What is it? Rejection, abandonment, learning to bring all that, learning to quiet ourselves before God. And Craig, as you said, that often requires pulling away, And then that final step, all of this is laid out in walking with God. The final step of simplicity in this is simply yielding. Lord, you can say yes or no. I really am open to what you have to say. We'd love to take that vacation this summer, but I don't know that that's a good decision. And I really need to yield my insistence on hearing yes and say, Lord, you really can say anything you want to say to me. If the answer is no right now, I can accept that. So just that simple posture of yieldedness, surrender.
Yeah. John, let's keep the conversation going because it feels like we're on a gold mine here of just where people live and some of the questions and issues I have when it just comes to intimacy.
Yeah. So we'll pick this conversation up next time. Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. We hope you loved it. We love getting your feedback as well. If you're enjoying these podcasts and would like to leave us a comment, please visit the iTunes store and do so. And by the way, all of our audio resources are now available for purchase through the iTunes store. You can find our resources and our other podcasts by searching for either Ransomed Heart or John Eldredge on the iTunes store. And to find out more about Ransomed Heart, our podcast, our events, and all of the things that we're offering and doing, come to our website at www.ransomedheart.com.